Hi, I'm Nick Haig, and welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. Today's guest has been named by Advertising Age as one of its inaugural 25 marketing technology trailblazers. Professor Peter Fader is an expert in the analysis of behavioural data to understand and forecast customer purchasing activities. He works with some of the largest companies in the world around the application of topics including customer relationship management, lifetime value of the customer, and sales forecasting for new products. He's written 3 books on the subject of customer-centricity and co-founded a predictive analytics firm, which he subsequently sold to Nike. If you're interested in marketing, how to develop your company's customer centricity, or how you can be more strategic with your conversations with your CFO, then this is definitely the podcast for you. However, before I introduce my guest today, I'd like to ask you a favour. If you like what you hear today, then I'd really appreciate if you follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Of the thousands of people that listen and watch, less than 30% do follow and subscribe, but it really does help the show to get found. So I only ask one thing of you in 2025. Just please click that button. It really is appreciated. Welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, Peter.
World's greatest business thinkers. What am I doing here?
Well, you're one of those.
Oh, no. But it's wonderful to talk to you. Wonderful to be part of it.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on. And, as always, I've given a few words to introduce you and your specialism. But it would be great if you could expand on that background, as well as telling the listeners what has kept you at the Wharton School for the last 38 years, because you've held that position there of Professor of Marketing for a long time. So there must be something particularly special about the school itself.
A lot of it goes back to when I was an undergraduate and PhD student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And this one nutty professor, she came to me, we're talking like 1982, 1983, and she said, "We are building the electron microscope of the customer. And pretty soon we're going to be able to tag and track and observe and understand and leverage data about customer behavior that we couldn't have even imagined before." I thought she was a bit of a nutcase, but she was so right. And that's it. Because for 38 years, the kind of data that we've been collecting just gets better and more interesting. The kinds of questions that we're able to ask and answer based on that data is just become richer. And companies' willingness, desire, passion to leverage some of that data and those insights, it just continues to grow. So it just keeps getting better and better and better. Right time, right place. I'm just really happy to continue riding that wave.
Yeah, and like you say, things have evolved massively over those years. Who'd have thought 38 years ago, the data that we'd have had at our fingertips in order to be able to profile and dig deeper on who the customer is and therefore, target them in ways that we'd never thought was possible back then.
Exactly.
You're an expert on customer centricity. You've written 3 books on the subject, and you've got worldwide recognition for your contributions in research to customer insights. I think, therefore, a good starting point for today is if you can define what customer centricity means to you.
Sure. So let's think about that. Let's try to keep it real concise. 3 things. Number one, kind of obvious, but not all customers are created equal. Different customers, different needs, different values, different ways to extend and leverage that value. Uh, Again, it's obvious, but a lot of companies don't act on it. A lot of companies just focus on the customer. Will the customer like it? Sure. So number one, customers are different. Number two, we can quantify those differences. We can put dollars and cents up against them. The idea of customer lifetime value. We can really do this. We can really size up customers and say this one's worth X and that one's worth Y. And number three, once we know that, once we understand that customers are different and we can quantify it, then it's not just a matter of then just doing a lot of marketing stuff to upsell and cross sell, but then we can take some of those customer asset values and extend them through the organization and get other people in supply chain and finance and maybe even the HR talent management to actually be able to care about, contribute to, and leverage those differences.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people forget, don't they? At the end of the day, the primary objective of every company, in whatever sector you're in, whatever marketplace in the world you're in, is to make a profit. And you cannot maximize profits over a long period of time, at least, if you aren't customer centric. So it's crucial to all those things that you said.
It's again, it's obvious when you say it. No one can disagree. And let's just go one step further. It's to make profits. So where are those profits coming from? Customers,
Yeah,
acquiring customers, the right ones, having them stay with you, having them engage more often, having them spend more when they do. It's so clear. Yet so many companies are out there either trying to build a brand or just expand geographically. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that stuff, but any of those kinds of tactics that we do are just a means to an end.
yeah,
The end being customer acquisition, retention, repeat purchase, and spend.
yeah.
There's where we have to put at the top of the list.
Yeah, and I think it's important at this early stage that we say, and you say it very clearly in your book, how different customer centricity is to product centricity. That's still selling products, but it's a bit faceless, nameless. Just targeting any and every customer to try and buy that customer, and obviously a lot of wasted valuable resources in doing that. So it's very much not product centric; it's customer centric.
Exactly, but it goes right back to the history lesson that for years and years and years, when before we had the electron microscope of the customer, when we didn't have the ability to tag and track and understand the differences, the one thing that we could observe, manage, measure was the product, and we'd obsess over things like market share and share of wallet and stuff like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those metrics, but to me, they should be in the back seat behind a lot of those customer metrics. That
Yeah,
the company is not in business to make and sell products. They're in there to create and build relationships with customers. And products are just a way to help do that, but
yeah,
they're not the end goal.
yeah.
That's where customer centricity and product centricity really bump into each other. And bit by bit, more and more companies are waking up and recognizing the difference.
Well, they are, but like you said there, it's simple stuff. What is it's obvious stuff. But my background is from helping some of the world's largest companies in B2B market research. But in B2B markets, that it's crazy how many people are still product centric. When you get behind the scenes and understand how they're trying to push various different products. So
I will say, of course, you're right. It's part of it's just human nature. It's endemic to all of marketing. I'd say B2B is a little bit better than
really,
B2C.
right,
Because in B2B, when we're talking about larger transactions, more valuable relationships, fewer customers, more ability to interact with them, the idea of building relationships, of having kind of key account management and
true,
things like that, just comes more naturally than in a lot of the B2C world, where it really is just the faceless, nameless mass of customers. Let's just put it out there and hope that they buy it. So, in many ways, some of these notions of customer centricity are to take things that we kind of understand and expect and do in certain B2B settings, and just to try to make them more broadly applicable.
yeah.
Say that we can do the kind of small numbers of customers, large number of dollars B2B thing, and apply that even in mundane B2C settings.
Yeah, yeah. So, understanding, you've already mentioned it, customer lifetime value is this key step in developing a customer centric strategy. Yet, it's frequently misunderstood in practice. In lay terms, Peter, what is customer lifetime value? How do you calculate it?
It's real simple conceptually. It's going to be the future profitability of the customer. So let's emphasize two key words there. Future. Too often, companies will talk about customer lifetime value, and they're talking about just historic profitability, and there's useful information there, but the past is not always a perfect guide to the future. So we're going to project how long you're going to stay, how often you're going to spend, how much you're going to spend, and the second part is profitability. We really do care about costs. really do care about just all the financial value that you're bringing. It's not just engagement for the sake of it. It's not just let's bring these customers along on a journey and hope that money shows up at the end. It's putting the dollars and cents in and out, revenues and costs, front and center, and being really, really careful, not only about how we come up with these forecasting models, but even just doing the accounting. Like, how do we do the cost accounting on customers? Which costs should be attributed to this particular customer? The field of accounting hasn't really done that particularly well. So it's kind of ironic that the world of marketing is kind of telling the accountants how to do it. It's interesting, it's important. And customer lifetime value just kind of reflects all that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so like you say, it's predictive. It's it's looking at the future, but it's also looking at that customer relationship that you hold. The number of transactions, the value of those transactions, and also in this modern day, some of the other activities around that. So social activity, for example, posting ratings and reviews. That's important. That all feeds into the model too, doesn't it?
Exactly. And to the extent that we can tag and track who's posting the ratings and reviews, who's engaging with our content, who's visiting the website, if we can use the same tagging and tracking to then tie that to who's actually making the purchases and what are they buying, to really start to understand the incremental value that kind of engagement brings in. Again, it's not just a matter of feeling good about it. It's not just a matter of having a customer experience campaign and just hoping that just a bunch of people visit our site and watch our TikTok videos. It's connecting that kind of engagement to actual profitability. Some companies will struggle with that, and understandably so. Sometimes the data is going to be hard to triangulate. You got to make the investments in the systems that let you do that. Every time you're going to be running some kind of campaign, you got to ask yourself, what's the value of the customers who engage with it, and how much more valuable are they after that campaign than they were before? So when
Yeah,
you have that kind of financial discipline to both drive and evaluate different kinds of campaigns, everything's going to come together nicely.
yeah. And I think another thing that I've come across and when speaking to clients and calculating this for others is it's obviously you got to look prospective, but the data is retrospective, isn't it? It's that's how you hold the customer data, but so that gives you the clues, but you shouldn't always follow that regimentally, should you? I mean, the future customer base might look and feel different. You might want it to look and feel different.
Yeah, but it's a good point though that we can't ignore the past. In fact, there's a lot we can learn from the past to set up a lot of these both the future looking models as well as the customer centric tactics that we're talking about. So, you've referred to my three books. Book number three, The Customer Base Audit, is unashamedly retrospective, descriptive. Before we run any models, before we deal with any math, before we worry about scary Greek letters and things like that, let's just look at that historical data. Let's look at it the right way. Let's see some of the patterns that we've seen historically that's going to both motivate us to come up with those forward looking models, as well as give us some starting point tactics to consider to do some of the customer centric things that we've been referring to.
Yeah, yeah. I think in my previous existence, we were a market research company, so we had a few contracts in place for customer experience trackers or brand trackers, things like that. But the majority was ad hoc. There was no subscription model. So when we were looking at who we should target and who would make those decisions, well, some people had commission research all the time. Those customer experience brand trackers, they might want to not even move before having research tell them what to do. Whereas some of our clients might be looking at market assessment, big due diligence projects, and they'd happen every 3 to 5 years. And so it's understanding as well, is your customer still a customer if they haven't done work with you for 3 years? And they were, and we had a big database. We used to target them, but it's knowing those different characteristics of different customers, isn't it? Which I'm sure we'll get onto as well today.
Yeah, that's a really great point that you raised. It's something that we emphasize a lot in that third book that I just referred to. A lot of your customers don't see themselves as your customers. You think because we sold them a thing, some product or service, that we have a relationship there. But to a lot of them, it's, hey, 2 years ago, I gave you money, you gave me a thing, it was a fair deal, now leave me alone.
Yeah.
If I need more, I'll come back. So we tend to use a lot of relationship metaphors, dating and marriage with our customers, and we kind of flatter ourselves about the nature, the depth of those relationships. But in many, many, many cases, there's nothing there. A lot of our customers, the most common customer, is kind of one and done. On one hand, that's kind of upsetting, but on the other hand, that's just the reality of it. Don't take it personally. This customer doesn't really need a relationship with you, and it's not your fault. So just looking at it in kind of a fairly objective way, rather than making it more romantic to talk about relationships and so on, but will just bring us clarity, help us just think just better, allocate our resources more effectively, and make better decisions, make more money,
Yeah.
instead of thinking that every customer is our best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. So, customer centricity, it seeks to understand which characteristics are most closely associated with the lifetime value of a customer. And you explain this in your book, the one on the shelf behind me, the Customer-Centricity Playbook. So that's your second book. That every customer is born with certain characteristics that you call the customer goodness. Can you expand on what you mean by customer goodness?
Yeah, so again, not all customers are created equal. Some are just inherently better than others. And so, how does that goodness, how does that betterness show up? Well, they're easier to acquire. They're going to come in a little bit more quickly. They're going to be a little bit. It's going to be kind of a little bit less expensive and burdensome on our part to bring them in. They're going to stay a little bit longer. They're going to engage a little bit more deeply. They're going to be a little bit less price sensitive. They're going to complain a little bit less often. They're going to be slightly more willing and able to refer other customers who themselves are going to be slightly better. So it's a whole bunch of slightlys, a whole bunch of things that any one of these things isn't going to make or break the business or that customer relationship. When you add up a bunch of these pretty good things, it really leads to just dramatic differences between those customers who have the goodness and those who don't. We can use traditional marketing research to try to figure out attitudinally or psychographically what makes those customers different, and that's great. But in many cases, it's not necessarily going to be about kind of who they are, how they think. It's great if we can do that, but very often it's just going to be more about their behavior.
Mm.
Which specific products have they bought from us? Which messages do they respond most to? Which channel did we acquire them through? Which campaign did we acquire them through? So personally, I like to start with the behavioral characteristics to try to sort out those good from not as good customers, and then layer on some of the attitudinal, the emotional, to help flesh that out a little bit further.
Yeah. Yeah. I've written a couple of books on customer experience, and specific to this topic. Everyone knows Fred Reichhold, of course. Invented the Net Promoter Score. First introduced in his book The Ultimate Question, but 10 years prior to that book, he wrote the book The Loyalty Effect, and he introduced this idea of customer goodness. Then, didn't he? About how.
Exactly right. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's give credit where it's due. I've just had the privilege of having a kind of an email conversation with Fred just yesterday, and he really got this going. And a lot of people are unaware of the loyalty effect. The thing was written in 1996. That's like 5,000 years ago. But that really started it all. The idea that not all customers are created equal. Everything I've said about the goodness, those are his ideas. And then it led naturally to Net Promoter Score. A lot of people don't make the connection, but he looked around and said, what is it about the companies who have a slightly higher mix of those good customers? And that's where he kind of I don't even say stumbled into, that doesn't give him enough credit, but came up with the idea of Net Promoter Score. Some companies were already doing things kind of sort of like that, and he and some of his other Bain colleagues, Rob Markey in particular, did just a really great job of formalizing it, standardizing it, educating companies about it, and teaching them how to leverage it. I think what they've done with Net Promoter Score, and it's kind of unusual to hear this because I'm an academic. Academics tend to dislike Net Promoter Score. They tend to think it oversimplifies things. We look at the more academic ways that we measure satisfaction. I'm a big fan of NPS.
Yeah.
I like the simplicity. I like the fact that it doesn't say, what's the average satisfaction? It says, let's look at the differences. How many are at one extreme? How many at the other? It's celebrating the spread. It's celebrating heterogeneity. So really big fan of what NPS has done. And in many ways, what I'm trying to do is to emulate that with lifetime value. If
Yeah.
I could make it as accessible, as intuitive, as appealing, as actionable as Fred Reichheld and Rob Markey have done with NPS, then I'll be just very satisfied myself. Still a long way to go. It's hard to convince people that some of these more quantified metrics actually do apply to them, but we're making progress. We've come a long way.
Well, I think you're doing a good job, Peter. But yeah, our work isn't finished, is it? And this podcast is just one of those to teach the uneducated out there on customer lifetime value. And I think yeah, if you think back to the loyalty effect and Fred's book, then it was breaking ground, but it was conceptual still, wasn't it? And it's now we're able to get the data, we're able to actually calculate this customer
Exactly
lifetime.
right. Yeah, the loyalty effect was conceptual, and to Fred and again Rob and other folks at Bain, to their credit, making it tangible, coming up with that ultimate question, all of a sudden turned it from conceptual to practical, and that's what I've been trying to do. And in my case, it's a little bit different in that a lot of the earlier work was it's not so much conceptual, but it was academic.
Yeah,
And it was built on real data. There's real stuff to it, but it was easy to dismiss because it was technical. Or people would look at some of these examples and would say, "Yeah, but my company's different." So broadening it out and going from the academic to the commercial was a tremendous step forward for me. Again, I'm a professor. I'm living in the publish or perish world, but finally, I don't want to say getting out of that world, 'cause I'm still in it, but finding ways to take some of these technical models and making them commercially accessible
yeah.
was not only just a good thing from a personal dollars and cents standpoint, but from a gospel spreading standpoint, to make the models just so easily accessible to a broad array of companies that they really changed everything for me.
Yeah, well, and I think it has stepped over that chasm, if you like, and it is in the commercial world now. And I think once you understand the concept, you quickly realise that every customer has this customer base that's heterogeneous, it's nature, all different kinds of customers, and therefore all different types of opportunities. And the key action from all of this is we can now go fishing for the best kind of customers. And as marketeers, they love segmentation, creating personas to help with targeting. But I think you say, well, hold on a minute, let's be a bit wary of using personas for our targeting, don't you?
Well, we have to be wary about how we come up with the personas.
Yeah,
See, the way it works in too many companies is they'll do some, either they'll just get the executives together and do an offsite meeting and fill whiteboards with sticky notes, or they'll do some focus groups, some kind of limited qualitative research. Not that there's anything wrong with that, big fan, but they'll draw very specific conclusions from it. And they'll say, our focal customer is, an 18 to 34-year-old, woman with, two kids and so on. And they'll come up with these kind of cutesy names about, working Wanda and busy Betty and carpool Carla and stuff like that. That's what troubles me is
yeah,
when we use a kind of shallow, narrow stereotypes to characterize our customers. And we don't do the customer base audit to ask ourselves who really are the best customers. They might not fit that profile. They might not fit that demographic. So I'm all for personas, but let's start with the behavioral data. Let's find out who really are our best customers in dollars and cents terms. What makes them different? Now, as we said before, it might be something about demographics. It might be something about psychographics, but it's also very likely going to be something about very specific behaviors. It's not necessarily what people look like, but it's the products that they buy, it's the messages they respond to, it's the channels that they favor. So if we can come up with a more holistic characterization of our best customers, it's going to include behavior as well as attitudes, demographics, psychographics, then we can start doing the persona thing. Then we can go to Meta and Google and other platforms and say, hey, give me some more customers like them. But knowing that there's just much stronger statistical support for those personas that we've come up with.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, Peter. Actually, going back to the NPS, I think one way where personas sometimes do help is where you personify the promoters, the passives, and the detractors, because they do have, the attitudes, the behaviours of why they think against the particular company, the service they're delivering, and then when you start to have a look at them, then you actually do see that the promoter P or passive Pam, however they want to call them, you're starting to put some financial value when you're looking at individually what they're spending with the company, and it's not surprising that promoters always outstrip the passives and the detractors in terms of the
But it
value.
doesn't always work that way. So I mean, for the most part, of course, you're right that the promoters are going to tend to be better than the passives, better than the detractors. But again, we can't paint everyone with the same brush, and there's going to be so many exceptions to it. So there are going to be some promoters who are just kind of happy talk people. It doesn't mean they buy from you all the time, but it means that when you ask them questions, they give you the answer you want. Likewise, there's going to be some of our best customers are pretty tough on us, and they're a little bit less forgiving. And if we kind of screw it up or deliver late, they're going to knock us in the NPS. So that's why it's really important to triangulate between the what people are saying and what they're doing. For the most part, they do line up pretty well. When we bring the two together, the attitude and the behavioral, to get this fully fleshed out picture, that's where lifetime value, net promoter score, just a dynamite combination. Those are my favorite projects to work on.
Yeah. I love what Amazon did, actually, specific to targeting as an example. Jeff Bezos selling books. Some business analysts said, well, it'll never work. It'll never even break even because it was a market in decline. But what I love about that, and it feeds very much into what you're talking about, Peter, is Jeff Bezos was taking a gamble, of course, that the internet was going to take off and deliver this opportunity for online retail. But the important thing is he wasn't selling books, was he? He was interested in these affluent people because affluent people purchase more books, and therefore understanding their needs and behaviours because he had the data on them, and then he could use that to sell anything else, everything else to them. And I think it's just a perfect example of a customer acquisition strategy using customer lifetime value, delivering something that from the
Exactly.
outset.
People forget that story. You look at the behemoth that Amazon is today, and there are a lot of people out there who don't realize that there used to be just a bookstore for years and years and years. And you're exactly right. It was a very smart, very deliberate decision. It wasn't because of any inherent capability with books per se, but using books as bait to catch the right kinds of customers and then to, well, not only just sell them a lot of other stuff, but to build deeper relationships with them. We look back at that story, which is true. It's not just an apocryphal story. And it's, again, so obvious in hindsight. But at the time, it was radical. It couldn't possibly work. What's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
And it's hard to emulate that specific approach. A lot of companies have tried, but once and I think it's the right way to go. Figure out what are the characteristics and make the better customers different. But you don't have quite the clean slate that Amazon did back there in the mid '90s. Much tougher today.
Yeah. Yeah. So first, you need to understand your customer base in order to know who you want to acquire and target, but you also need to retain your most profitable customers, ensuring your investment is aligned with the value that they're going to bring to you. You've developed this framework with offensive and defensive tactics for retaining and developing customers. Can you explain this? It's a 2x2 framework, isn't it?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a 2 by 2, so it means it's a gross oversimplification. So actually, let me just back up a step and say first, because you talk about the trade-offs between acquisition, and retention and development. When we have that budget, how much should we be spending to acquire versus to squeeze more value out of the customers we have? So let's first acknowledge that. One might say that's even the most important question of all. Wouldn't it be great if I can give you some rule of thumb to say that it should be a 30-70 split or a 70-30 split? And unfortunately, it depends. Depends a lot on the company, stage of the life cycle, competitive environment. So let's acknowledge all that. But now let's drill down specifically into the latter part of it, retention and development. Yeah, we recognize that once we have these good customers, we want to enhance their value. We want to keep them around longer, have them do more while they're with us. And unfortunately, the way that we've done that traditionally is just cross-selling and upselling. Not that there's anything wrong with cross-selling and upselling, but in this day and age, given both the sophistication of the data as well as the personalization tactics, there's so much more that we can do. Loyalty programs, strategic account management, premium services. There's just a litany of different kinds of tactics. And rather than just picking them arbitrarily or looking at our competitors and doing what they're doing, let's think very, very carefully about which one of those tactics we should be using with which customers at which time. And that's exactly where this 2x2 matrix that you referred to comes in. What are we trying to do right now? Are we trying to play offense or play defense? Again, depending on the competitive situation, if things are pretty good, let's squeeze more value. If things are pretty tough, let's hold on to those best customers. And to recognize that we might be doing different things with different customers, that we might be using fundamentally different tactics to play offense or defense with our best, most valuable customers versus the so-so ones. So just laying out these, and in some sense, again, it's an oversimplification, laying out some of these basic tactics, the loyalty program. In my book, literally, that would be a way of playing offense with so-so customers. Our best customers, we don't want to give them the buy 9, get 1 free because then we're giving margin away. But for those so-so customers who buy from us occasionally, we want to get them to buy a little bit more. That's playing offense, and that's with so-so customers. And I won't drag you and the listeners through all of it, but using some very simple logic as well as supported by very good data to understand which retention and development tactics we use at which time for which customers. Some people, like you, are kind of praising it up and down. To me, I'm proud of it, but I also downplay it, saying once you see it, it's kind of obvious. We just have to get there. And now that we're there, let's lock it in and use it instead of having to reinvent the wheel every time.
B2B Frameworks is a curated collection of proven business frameworks to develop your strategic thinking skills, solve your biggest business problems, and unlock your next promotion. Our mission is to help you achieve these goals. We want to create the next generation of successful business leaders by providing the tools and frameworks needed to create effective strategies that drive business growth. Each framework comes with a downloadable set of instructions with large, colourful diagrams and editable templates to guide you through the process step by step and prompt you to consider the problem from every possible angle. Along with audio guides and educational tools, our extensive content library is full of real-world examples and case studies of strategic thinking in action. So why learn with B2B Frameworks? We've carefully curated only the most effective, proven business and marketing frameworks. Our downloadable materials and audio guides will help you easily apply each framework. And the insights and advice you'll find across the site are based on 30 years of consulting experience from one of the world's leading business strategy experts, Paul Haig. B2B Frameworks is a small investment to advance your career or grow your business. Start your journey to becoming a successful business leader by joining B2B Frameworks today. Well, but I think you're right. I mean, it's always harder to simplify something, isn't it? And when you do see something, it's obvious. But creating that, I think what I think is great about it is it gives structure to what sometimes can be a messy business when people are thinking about retaining or looking to develop customers. People can just be scattergun approaches and just thinking far too far too in the clouds in terms of what they should be doing. So it brings structure, which I really like. And I think more than anything, it's where you talk about this paradox of customer centricity. The more you obsess over acquiring the best customers, then the more you need to retain and develop the lower value customers. And I think it's what I like about it is it gives this helps you understand the balance that you need to give your business, because you can't have all large accounts, otherwise you're in danger of putting too many eggs in too fewer baskets.
It's
Uh,
so
so
true.
it
And we see
helps you
examples of this all the time. So those are words, that paradox of customer centricity, that I first came up with probably around 2010. And it resonates as much today as it did, maybe even more so.
yeah.
I'll give you a very specific example. So I mentioned how I've commercialized a lot of these models. First did so through a company called Zodiac, brought lifetime value to life at full commercial scale. And it was great. We worked with lots of companies to give them the lifetime values. And we sold that company to Nike, which was, again, an amazing outcome back in 2018. And then the problem was they brought in a new CEO, John Donahue, and then he proceeded to kind of take some of these ideas. And I don't want to take too much credit or blame, and went a little bit too far with it. Let's only do the tactics. Let's only sell through the channels. Let's only sell the products that are going to be associated with the high value customers. Let's not sell through Amazon anymore. Sometime around then, Nike stopped selling through Amazon because they looked at it and said, on average, the customers who buy our stuff through Amazon aren't as good. So let's not sell through there at all. That was a problem. And that cost the CEO his job. That the pendulum swung a little bit too far, and they lost some of the breadth, they lost some of the creativity. And of course, it's Nike, and they're going to be fine, and the pendulum will swing back. But there are lots and lots of examples, big companies, small, product, service, B2B, B2C, where you got to strike that just right balance. That yes, some customers are more valuable than others, but we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, because then we're very, very vulnerable to
Yeah.
the kinds of things that Nike has been going through recently, as well as many, many other companies in many different sectors.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When we think, Peter, of customer centricity, we often think of this being about external customers, and that external customers are quite often, most of the time, owned by the marketing department. But I think if you're only looking at your external customers, then you're only looking at half the customer centricity equation, because you have internal customers too. And I think this is sometimes where marketers let themselves down, as CFOs do hold the purse strings for marketing. And that's why, again, I love the CLV conversation, the customer lifetime value, because it starts to focus this conversation around revenue and profit, that's generated, as opposed to maybe fluffier topics like customers or Pantone colors or delivering a consistent brand experience. All important still, of course, but not attention grabbers for the C-suite. Have you any tips for marketers on how they can turn the conversation of customer centricity to how it impacts corporate valuation and future cash flows?
Yeah, incredible experiences on it. For years and years, when I was first kind of stumbling into and pulling together and kind of fine tuning some of the CLV models, I'd be saying, hey, other people in the organization should care about this too. But I didn't really know what I was talking about. I didn't know what words to use. I didn't know what use cases to emphasize. But what happened is, as I mentioned before, we sold that first CLV company, Zodiac, sold it to Nike. Nike put a really tight non-compete on us. So we couldn't go out there and do the marketing thing for the next 3 years, from 2018 to 2021. So instead, we had to focus on a different audience, which would be the CFO, both internal financial people as well as external. So maybe private equity firms, investment banks. That was the one thing that we could do, was this idea of customer-based corporate valuation. So no, we can't say which email we should send to which customer, which time. We were limited by lawyers from doing that. But we can go to a private equity firm and say, what is this digitally native men's underwear company actually worth? And so for me, it was a tremendous education. I'm not a finance guy. And it helped me really fine tune a lot of the words that I was using. In fact, tremendous credit to my former PhD student, my co author, my co founder, Dan McCarthy, who was a finance guy, is now a marketing professor down at the University of Maryland, to help me learn how we can take these CLV concepts and methods and narratives and make them as impactful, accessible, and actionable as possible for whether it's not just the CFO, but the VP of Investor Relations, the people working in, FP&A, and just a lot of the people in the organization who ordinarily I would think would have zero interest in my kind of stuff. Turns out they have tremendous interest in it, and we can have tremendous impact by getting the right people involved with it. So the newer company that I'm running, Theta, focusing a lot on this idea of customer-based corporate valuation. It's been great, both commercially but even educationally, just open up all kinds of new horizons about what we can do with these models that we've just never thought about before.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this problem is that marketers face is they obsess too much, and we talk about it a lot over promotion and the advertising, and forget that there's another three P's. But even if they're looking after the four P's, they still need to focus a third of their attention on understanding the market. We talked about it today, understanding the customer, and they still need to place a third of their attention on developing strategies. So realistically, I think if marketers are only looking after promotion, they're only doing 1/12 of the job, which is, come on, guys, we need to get up to speed here. And that's again why I just love this model. It's it moves the conversation upstream. You're talking to the C-suite. You're fighting finance with finance topics, and you can really show how they can make money, which always makes them sit up and take.
Yeah, and we've really seen. I'd like to take some credit for that, the kind of better, tighter, more aligned conversation between marketing and finance. But I also just say a lot of companies just on their own have been waking up to that new reality and the new responsibility to create that kind of alignment. It's I really think we're on the edge of a revolution, and that 20 years from now a lot of these ideas about taking these marketing models, customer behaviors, and just having them be just part of the day-to-day toolkit for the people in finance. We're getting there.
Yeah, we
Right,
are.
right now, there's a handful of companies doing it, but every day there's new ones waking up, and again, big and small, B2B, B2C, domestic, international, and I just take great pride. I mean that's the legacy that I want to leave, much more than the academic work and so on. It's really something that's going to last and is going to just improve the efficiency of how companies and markets operate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we started today by talking about the fact that every business's goal, no matter what sector, is to make a profit and can only be done by meeting customers' needs. From all the research you've done, Peter, do you have a favourite case study of how a company has pivoted or become successful through being more laser focused on the customer?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to give you two examples, but it's the same person who pins them together. So my hero in this regard is a gentleman named Zachary Anderson.
Okay.
Today, he is the Chief Data Analytics Officer at NatWest Bank
Right.
over there in the UK. Previously, he was in that same role with Electronic Arts, the gaming company on the West Coast. So, first of all, we're talking about two wildly different companies, different sectors, different geographies, different everything. But the idea of taking these notions of customer lifetime value and infusing them through the organization, finding how to change the conversations with the people in R&D and the people who are doing media buys and the CEO to make them not only aware of customer lifetime value, but to make it job one for them. He found great success at EA and then said, you know what? I'm going to try something, a bigger challenge. Let's go to this big, stodgy, heavy regulated bank over there in the UK. And the things that he's doing to turn it around and just raise the bar for everyone, it's really incredible.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's been able to do this twice now with two very different kinds of organizations shows that it wasn't just kind of getting lucky, right time, right place. That there's really something there to having this mindset, to being to knowing, again, how to do this kind of measurement, but how to get people on board with it. So I just have just so much admiration. I mean, I wish I could say that everything he's done is just taking pages out of my book and executing on them. It's really quite the opposite. I've probably learned more from him than he's learned from me. And every single day, I'm looking at different content that he's putting out there. Zach Anderson, different campaigns that he's running, different people that he's hiring, and saying, what can I extract from that, and what's he going to do next? So some really nice success stories like that.
Well, I think that's it, and I didn't know what you were going to say to that, Peter. But that question. But I bank with NatWest, so I'm a customer. I see it firsthand, and I'm a real advocate towards the app itself. The banking app is fabulous. The way that they've created that.
I've made a
Uh,
lot of changes with it just in these last 5 years or so.
yeah,
Data driven, but with broad organizational buy-in, running smart experiments all the time and evaluating the right way. It's a great story, and you don't really see a lot written about it. I'm not aware of any books or HBR articles that are focusing on it. So a lot of it is a case study that's just unfolding before our eyes. And I think some aspects of it, the best is still yet to come.
yeah. I mean, it's refreshing as well to hear different brands mentioned, isn't it? Because I know, the likes of Apple are always mentioned. I'm here on an Apple MacBook, and but I think it's right, and Steve Jobs so heavily quoted, especially specific to customer centricity, starting with the customer experience and working back towards the technology, not the other way around. Making sure that you don't just throw a new innovative tech feature at the customer that they don't want. So all that's fitting, but you wouldn't necessarily think of EA Sports or or NatWest Bank specifically, when thinking of that. So that's
That's
a good
right.
example. Um, well, and I suppose building on that, as an example, your first book was written in 2012, and then the customer centricity playbook that we talked about on the shelf, that was written in 2018, and then the customer audit was following that, and there's it's interesting to look back actually at some of the case studies you've used in those books that have still around, gone on to face the odd bump in the road as all companies do, but with regards to customer centric success, the world has changed. And therefore, competitors adjust their strategies, game conditions change, so you need to shift. And market dynamics, they are continually changing. What advice would you give to companies to how they do or can stay ahead of the?
Okay, so let's again, as always, I'm going to back up. You're absolutely right that the first customer centricity book was written in 2012, but then the folks here at Wharton School Press said it's time to update it. The world's changing, so in 2020 it was time to rewrite the book.
Right.
And I looked at the book and I said, you know what? Even though it's different companies coming and going, pendulum swinging, the basic idea is customers not created equal, lifetime value, broad applications of it. That's timeless. So I said, I'm not going to rewrite the book. In fact, I'm going to treat this, at that point, 8-year-old book as a time capsule. Let's evaluate the words I was putting on the page back then in light of what's happened since then. So the newer version of the book, written in 2020, 99% of the words are identical. But at the same time, I'm going to be really, really honest about some of the stories that have changed, some of the things that I have moved away from. So some other companies that I wasn't thinking about that are now doing some great things. So I think that the basic tenets of it are fairly robust, are fairly timeless. And the companies that we're going to talk about today as the best might not be the best, 10 years from now. But the core principles of it, I think, will continue to hold true.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, and actually, I look back on some of those examples, and again, I'm here in the UK, so I can use Tesco as an example because I regularly shop in there, And I saw how they'd embraced data and align their activities in their early days. But then, to our global listeners, they had a real shocker in 2014 where a massive accounting scandal.
It's a perfect example of a company that really, one might say, kind of wrote the book on customer centricity years before I did. I mean, it was just amazing things that Tesco did, but then they struggled again, pendulums swing. And it's been very interesting to see a lot of the other grocery retailers in the UK saying, you know what? We can do that. We can do that just as well, if not better. So I look at some of the things going on with, Sainsbury and Asda and some of the others and that are now doing things that would have been inconceivable for them
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago. And it's just great to watch these kinds of market dynamics occur, but find some of the common themes that will persist through them.
Yeah. Yeah. But I suppose the key theme is staying close to the customers, understanding those customers and then, using, as you say, the tried and tested equations, the customer lifetime value, that nothing changes there, and keep focusing on the customer.
That's right, but you do have to. But yes, the core principles of customer centricity aren't going to change, but the tactical way that we execute it must change,
Yeah.
And that's that's behind a lot of these cautionary tales that we've been sharing.
Yeah. This show is sponsored by B2B Frameworks, and on their website, they've got over 100 different frameworks to help every aspect of business, from customer experience and customer centricity specific frameworks. And we've talked through one of your business frameworks today, Peter, but specific to customer centricity, is there a favorite business framework you've got, and why?
As I'm building out my lifetime value models for every different kind of business model that's out there, so pure subscription, here's the model we'll build for Spotify and Netflix, or pure non-contractual, here's the model that we're going to build out for Amazon or a grocery store. My favorite these days, from a lot of different perspectives, would be the hybrid. So here in the US, if you ask people their favorite company, they'll probably say Apple. But when you name companies and see which one gets their pupils to dilate and their hearts to race, maybe no company does it more effectively than Costco. And that hybrid business model where you're a member and you're paying that regular membership fee, but a lot of the way they're making money off you are the discretionary things that you're buying while you're a member. Love that hybrid model for a lot of reasons. Number one, you get very rich data from it. You get kind of two ways of examining people. Are they renewing the membership, and how much stuff are they doing while they're a member? So rich, interesting, varied data. Number two, it's still kind of new for a lot of companies. So it's interesting to watch a lot of traditional non-contractual companies, again, just a typical retailer bringing in a membership program, or the other way around, a membership-oriented company bringing in discretionary purchases. Beyond your renewals, here's this other stuff you can do above and beyond that. So it's just interesting to watch new business models emerge. Look at some good practices, some not so good practices. Build out the statistical models. So I'm having just a real good time watching these worlds kind of converge to this kind of hybrid Costco-like business model.
Yeah, I like that. To finish, just a few questions I ask all my guests, Peter. So to begin with, what are you reading at the moment? I love books. I always like to be guided on what books to read. So,
well, this is probably not the answer you're looking for. So I actually tend to avoid business books. I find anyway. So I like to read like real books, and these days on the top of the book pile is a book called Dream by about Akeem Olajuwon, the kind of the great basketball player.
yeah.
And it's a really great book. He's a really interesting person. The reason one of the reasons I kind of stumbled into it is because it's written by a woman named Mirren Fader, same last
Right.
name as me. We're not related, I don't think. But I really admire her work, and so I've been spending a lot of time reading books about basketball players by what I like to call cousin Mirren, even though we weren't really cousins. But There's a surprising answer for you.
No, well, not at all. In fact, I don't know. You probably can't read it from behind, but there's a a mix of business books behind me. But I love all sport. I love basketball, and there's lots of books from Ryan Giggs and Federer, Carlo Ancelotti, who's a football
Yeah,
manager. Alex Ferguson. I'm a Man United support. So I will. I do love all different types of books. I'll look that one up, Peter, for sure.
sure.
Specific to business books, you've written three. We've named them today, in terms of customer centricity. So focus on the right customers for strategic advantage, the customer centricity playbook, and the customer based audit. Is there any particular best business book you could guide people towards?
You know, um, in terms of, again, it's not going to be a business book. But remember the theme underlying all this. Not all customers are created equal. We can measure that. If we can figure out who those best ones are way out there on the right tail, and if we understand what makes them, everything we've been saying, believe it or not, the person who I think did the best job of laying out those ideas, you might be familiar with the book The Black Swan
Of course. In
by
fact, that's
Nicholas
on the
Nassim
shelf
Taleb.
behind as well.
Exactly. And he has a whole series of books, Fooled by Randomness. And so he's not a business guy. In fact, if anything, he's probably pretty skeptical about business. But those basic ideas about how the systems operate and that not all things are created equal. And if you can figure out which things are way out there, sometimes those are bad things, catastrophes. Sometimes they're good things, very valuable customers. But really just understanding the the nature of the randomness. Too often we use random as a pejorative term. Oh, it's random. It means it's not controllable. But actually, there are some very systematic patterns to randomness. We harness that through these statistical models, and then we write these lightweight business books on top of that to avoid being technical, but to have people kind of wake up and embrace the idea that a lot of that randomness, a lot of those wild differences can actually be measurable and profitable rather than just trying to play it safe or playing it right down the middle for some kind of average customer. So I've
Yeah,
really learned a lot from him. And I think there are really, really good business lessons from his books if you read them from kind of a business mindset.
yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Well, it's going to, again, obvious in hindsight. One of the things that we did at Zodiac when we first commercialized the models is we would do a lot of, here, we'll do this one for you for free, hoping you'll be so impressed by it that you'll then come back and, buy from us. Don't give anything away for free. If there's real value in what you're doing, people will pay for it.
Yeah,
Maybe you'll do it at cost. But don't give anything away. You kind of cheapen the value of the things that you're doing, and very often people are doing it almost out of fear. Like, what if they don't like me? What if they reject me? And you know what? It's okay.
yeah.
Sometimes people might say, you know what? I like your stuff, but I'm not willing to pay for it. Fine. You probably wouldn't have been a very good customer anyway. So don't give anything away for free.
Well, I fully agree with that, Peter. I mean, I've tried, back in the days, online workshops for free, sign up for free. But actually, if you put a dollar or a sterling or a euro value towards it, people do sign up more. They value it more. Probably because it's not their money, it's the company's money anyway. So, which business leader do you most admire and why?
So I'm going to lean to the academic side. So because I guess we sort of count as business leaders, and there's
Cool.
people in my profession who are really really good at doing the research, but also good at communicating it, also good at helping managers and just other people execute on it. I mean, one example would be my Wharton colleague Adam Grant. He
Yeah.
writes all these bestseller books, but he's a really, really, really good researcher. And there'll be some less known people in our field who are just again really, really good at doing both, at coming up with genuine new ideas, but also being just superb at educating, communicating, and executing on them. I mean, so many of my colleagues here at the Wharton School really are good at both. We're not just good researchers, but we actually care I've been bringing a lot of the research to practice. So I'll give a shout out to my colleague, my co-author, my department chair, Eric Bradlow, who's done a great job of not only doing research, but going out there and both commercializing it and helping companies better utilize it. I think there's just a lot of people in the academic circles where often we get kind of pigeonholed. Oh, you're just a bunch of professors. But some of us actually really do know a thing or two about business and can bring fresh perspectives that, not to knock the consultants, but can complement what kind of the pure practitioners are doing.
Well, I 100% agree with you there, Peter. So, hence, me reaching out and wanting you to come on this podcast as well. So, my final question is, who would you like me to reach out to in the future, invite to come on this podcast?
Oh, well, for sure, for sure. Name I mentioned before, the one who really kind of changed my life, Dan McCarthy, this former finance guy who then helped me not only elevate some of these lifetime value models, but to build that bridge to finance.
Yeah.
His ability to look at a company, to look at the statements that they put out there in the public domain, and then examine them through the eyes of the customer and the customer value is incredible. It's second to none. Um, and he's so articulate about the way that he talks about this stuff and the examples that he uses. Dan McCarthy. Everyone should be following him on the Twitter and the LinkedIn, and he'd be a great guy to talk to.
Excellent. Well, I'll reach out to Dan and shout out to him and please do follow him as well as Peter as well. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Peter. I pride myself on being an expert in customer experience, and your books and guidance over the years have certainly helped me develop strategies for my clients, grounded in numbers for them to act upon with confidence. And hopefully from today's discussion, our listeners will understand that customer centricity is a living process and that not all customers are equal. It's continually evolving, but the key is to getting your hands on the right data that can guide your marketing and operational tactics, of course, with the customer lifetime value equation guiding you as this compass. So as with anything in business, there are no guarantees, but I think if you do follow some of these key steps, it'll definitely help you and your company on the road to long-term success. We've covered so much, Peter. If anyone wants to get in touch, how best should they do that?
I don't hide very easily, so just Google my name. You'll find just all kinds of content and things. And by the way, I'm delighted when people do reach out, whether they want to follow some of the ideas or argue with me about them. Just having the discussion about customer centricity, the models, and the metrics. I think that's what we need to do is get more people talking about it in different ways. And I really appreciate all of your help and all your support to push those conversations forward.
No, well, no problem whatsoever, Pete. It's been a delight and an honour. So thank you again, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Peter. This podcast has been brought to you in partnership with Awards International. Awards International is dedicated to running successful business awards programs and conferences. Founded in 2008 by Don Hales and Neil Skihel, the company's core mission centers on honoring and celebrating exceptional achievements in customer and employee experience, but also in overall business excellence across diverse sectors. In addition, their aim is to showcase best practices, innovations, and achievements that contribute positively to these areas, ultimately inspiring other organizations to improve their own customer experience, employee engagement strategies, and overall business success. To find out more about Awards International and how to register your interest in their awards programs, check their website www.awardsinternational.com.